All right. Thank you very much, Lana. Thank you, Thank you, Todd, for having us here. Excited to be here. Good to see some familiar faces from around Berlin and around my career. I'm here to talk about AI and product strategy. And I'm here because I work in an AI-focused startup generally. Hopefully I have some interesting and useful things to share with you as you integrate AI into your product, or as you rise to that challenge that Todd put out there about how are you innovating around AI. Before I get too deep into it, I kind of want to know who I'm talking to. So I'd love to know how many of you, just quick show of hands, are in a product role, product manager, product owner, product leader. All right, definitely the vast majority. Do we have any designers here? Any engineers? All right, a couple. Excellent. That's excellent. And how many of you are using AI or generative AI specifically in your products today? Show of hands. OK, that's just about the 34% or whatever it was from the survey. How many of you are using generative AI just in your daily day-to-day job, just to look things up or deal with data? OK, quite a few more. Excellent. That's really helpful. Anyone had an AI chatbot try to break up their marriage? Anyone? OK, all right, good. We're safe then. All right, well, I will talk about AI, but I think one of the things I can try to do is give you a little bit of perspective. I've been in the industry for more than 20 years now, and I've spent plenty of time thinking about AI, just like probably a lot of us have over the last few years. But I want to put a little bit of perspective on AI in the context of other technology trends and other things that have happened in tech over the years. Ultimately, AI is a tool that should help you create better products, but it's not necessarily the thing that helps you create the best product in the first place. It's not really what the job is all about. In terms of my background, I started in product design, kind of industrial design, designing real products, moved into user interface design, and eventually moved into product management. Do you like how product management, the thing we make is slides? That's my little joke here. But the thing I love about these disciplines, and the thread that I think ties at least my career together, is that they're all about solving problems for people. Understanding what people need, trying to solve those problems clearly and well for them. That's an incredibly hard job, to be fair, but it's what motivates me, what gets me out of bed every day. And it's probably, I expect, what also motivates you. And AI can be a really valuable way to solve customer problems, as I mentioned. But I actually want to start back with product strategy, because I think that's really the part that's where we should all be starting when we're thinking about how to develop our products. There are no lack of product strategy gurus out there. The one that I subscribe to the most, or the one that resonates with me the most, is a guy named Gibson Biddle. Maybe you've read some of his work or seen one of his workshops. He's a former VP of product at Netflix. But the thing that he does well, I think, is he really distills what is otherwise a very daunting topic, right? Someone asks you, like, what is your product strategy? You're like, gosh, I don't know. Where do I start? How do I do it? He does a nice job of breaking that down into some really simple approaches. It's not to say that product strategy is easy, but that the principles behind it should be pretty straightforward. And when you have a good product strategy, it should be extremely clear. One of the models that he proposes for evaluating product hypotheses is called he calls it the DHM model, and it's about delighting customers in hard-to-copy, margin-enhancing ways. So what that stands for are three parts of your product hypothesis. Delighting customers, hopefully, is clear. You make products that people love. The hard-to-copy part is about creating kind of a defensive moat around your product, right? If you're just making widgets and the next guy is making widgets, then there's nothing really that's preventing them from beating you. So hard-to-copy is really important here. And margin enhancing is about making enough profit from the product enhancements that you're making that you can reinvest that into your product and continue growing your business from there. So pretty straightforward framework, and that's part of what I like about it. To use an example from Netflix, personalization is something that Netflix is extremely well known for. The delightful part, to use myself as an example, is that I love heist movies, right? These are movies where, like Ocean's 11, where they're like stealing things or robbing a bank or whatever. I'm not a criminal, but for some reason I love these movies. So the delightful part of Netflix's personalization is, hey, Andrew, we've got another heist movie for you. And I'm like, yes, play. The hard-to-copy part is that only Netflix really knows this. I've got lots of coworkers here that probably didn't know that I love heist movies, but Netflix, they definitely know. Okay. And the margin enhancing part is that Netflix can now take what they know about me and my love of heist movies and decide how much to invest in making more heist movies, because Netflix is also a production company, right? So you've got all these movie studios out there without streaming services, and they're like, I don't know, should we make a heist movie? Should we make a rom-com? Should we make another reality show? Netflix has the data right in their servers. So it's extremely margin enhancing for them. And so you might be sitting there going, Andrew, enough of this ivory tower stuff. I'm just an individual contributor. I never get to work on strategy. It's not really part of my job, or like, this isn't important to me. I would argue that product strategy is really important for everyone for two big reasons. The first one is that product strategy is inherently sort of derivative. A good product strategy probably derives from a company strategy. And then if your product team has lots of divisions, then you probably have a division strategy, and then it goes down to the group strategy. And so even if you're a PM down here in the 4th level of PM hell, and you're just working with your one team, you have a team strategy that hopefully connects all the way up to the chain to what your company is doing. And that's important. And the second reason is because if you can do this well, practice makes perfect. And if you're ambitious and you want to move into a product leadership role, and you really do want to be responsible for that product strategy or that company strategy. All right, I thought maybe, all right, a little feedback. All right, maybe I'm standing in the wrong place. If you really want to do that stuff in the future, this is a great way to show that you can do it so that your leadership recognizes you and gives you those opportunities. So no matter what level you're operating at, and no matter what framework you use for evaluating your ideas, your hypotheses, find a way to define your product strategy as clearly as you possibly can. Now, the other issue we're dealing with when it comes to AI is hype. And I want to talk about hype for a second, because a lot of us work at tech companies, and for better or worse, hype is closely associated with tech. In fact, it's sort of, I would even argue, it's the oxygen that tech companies breathe. So it's there, we can't deny it. But I think it's helpful to understand it and understand what those cycles look like. In fact, Gartner Research defined this in 1995. They call it the hype cycle. A lot of you have probably heard about this, but I'm going to walk you through it very quickly. It starts on the left here with a technology trigger. People get excited to the peak of inflated expectations, unreasonable expectations, down into the trough of disillusionment, up through the slope of enlightenment, and eventually to the plateau of productivity. It sounds a little bit like a Tolkien novel or something, like an epic voyage. But I think it does a nice job of explaining that behavior that we see from people. When something new happens, they get super excited, then they realize maybe this isn't what I wanted, and eventually it gets accepted, right? In technology, we've had lots of hype cycles in the past, so I just want to show you a few of them. We had PCs in the 70s and 80s. We had the internet. We had cloud computing. We've had mobile computing. We've had Bitcoin, crypto, blockchain, et cetera. And I would argue AI is another one of those one of those items that's going through the hype cycle. But AI has already been through several hype cycles. It started in 1956. This is when artificial intelligence, the term, was actually coined at a conference in Dartmouth way back when. The compute wasn't there to do the things they wanted, but people were extremely excited about the opportunities. In the mid-'80s, there was this concept of rule-based expert systems that came out. It was, as far as I can tell, it was really just decision trees to help make decisions faster. It didn't end up panning out necessarily the way people wanted, and we sunk into what is now known as an AI winter. Until around the 2010s, when machine learning and neural networks really kicked up. And this is now something that probably a lot of your companies are using, or a lot of the products that you use. In fact, Netflix's personalization engine probably uses a lot of machine learning. So the big event, though, that I want to talk about, and the place that I want to focus, is really generative AI. And I would argue that hype cycle started with the introduction of ChatGPT in November of 2022. And the indication of the hype here is that you've probably seen this chart. ChatGPT reached 100 million users within 2 months, which was a record at the time for kind of consumer products. This is an illustration of the delight that people were seeing from ChatGPT and eventually other large language models. By the way, it was eclipsed 6 months later by Instagram Threads. I personally think they should be disqualified because they were already part of a massive app ecosystem, but anyway, that's where we are. So where are we now in this hype cycle with generative AI? I mean, I would argue that ChatGPT was the sort of technology trigger. We climbed to the peak of inflated expectations when people were like, well, I guess we won't have to work anymore because AI is going to do everything for us. Not necessarily true. It even got as bad as like AI is going to destroy humanity, right? In Q2 of 2023, a bunch of AI scientists wrote letters warning about this. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm not quite seeing it. We've started to decline, I think, into the trough of disillusionment as we realize that generative AI is maybe not as reliable as we might expect. It can have the bias of their creators. There are ethical considerations. And it turns out that all of that training data is not necessarily as free as the foundational models might have thought in the past. So where are we now? Well, this is just one guy's perspective, but I think we're somewhere on this slope of enlightenment, starting to understand what the boundaries of generative AI are, what we can actually do with it, and we're starting to sort of integrate it into our everyday tasks, jobs, and products, as Todd was saying. And maybe I'm a little optimistic. I mean, I am a product manager after all. I don't know if any of you other product managers are inflicted with this optimism. So with all of this going on and with all of this hype, you may have heard this from your CEO last year. What are we doing about AI? I don't think there was a CEO who didn't ask that question in 2023. And you might have thought to yourself, as a good product person, like, is this the right question to ask? Like, is this about our customers or something? I think that's a fair question, but I want to talk a little bit about where your CEO might have been coming from, because they may have a very relevant point here. The first is about valuations. If you're a startup, valuations are determine how much money you have, how much money you can raise, and they're super critical. This is a chart of pre-money valuations, meaning the valuations of companies before they were funded, by vertical. And you can see that during 2021, 2022, fintech and SaaS were like pretty high, and AI was kind of floating through the middle there. As we hit 2024, you can see that everything else is low, and AI is twice the size of its nearest competitor in terms of valuations. So if you're a CEO trying to raise money out there, guess what you want to have as part of your pitch? We are an AI company, right? The other factor, and this is more about the buying side of things, there's a VC named Jamin Ball who writes a bi-weekly newsletter, which I would highly recommend. He wrote a couple weeks ago about this concept of bifurcating budgets. So on the left-hand side here, you have the tech spend, the tech budget, if you will, of a big company, not necessarily a tech company, but just a big enterprise. And let's say it's growing 20% year over year because that's what their business is growing at, or that's what their needs are. They've decided that that's how much it's going to grow. After AI, the promise, based on things like this Klarna experience, the promise of AI is so great that all of the budget growth is going into this AI bucket. So the budget has bifurcated, it's split into two buckets, and now all of the budget is going towards AI. So if you can be a company that's providing an AI solution that might give those kinds of returns, you are much more likely to tap into bigger budgets that are available from your customers. But CEOs are still asking, what are we doing about AI? And if you're a smart product person and you've managed to stay cool despite all of the hype and all of the madness, I think you still need to focus on your customers. And that's what I'm going to encourage you to stay focused on today. I don't think any customer ever asked for AI, right? Customers have real problems. Customers' problems are things like, I need someone to watch my kid on Tuesday mornings, or I need a pair of jeans that makes my butt look good, or I need an appointment at the immigration office, which, by the way, if anyone has an appointment at the immigration office, please let me know, because I really need one. These are real problems. And so you really got to go back to basics when you're figuring out what you want to do. Ask yourself the basic questions. Who is my customer? What is their problem? How painful is the problem that they have? And are they willing to pay for us to solve it for them? If you can't answer those questions, you probably can't have a successful product in the first place. So no matter how much AI you're actually throwing at the problem. So you can use the DHM model to come up with hypotheses, to think about how you might want to solve it. And then, and only then, you can ask yourself, how can AI help? So as mentioned, I work at a company that I would say is clearly in the AI bucket, a little bit in the SaaS bucket, a little bit in the AI bucket. I want to talk about the experience that we've had at Honeysales implementing AI as part of our product and some of the learnings that we had as part of that. Honeysales is a seed stage startup based in Berlin. Our mission is to make every sales conversation relevant. So to go back to the basic questions, our customer is B2B sales reps. It gets a little more specific than that, but for our purposes, we'll stay there. Their problem is that the average sales rep has 1,000, 2,000, sometimes 5,000 prospects that they need to be selling to. And they don't have enough time to know what's going on with all of those prospects. So our job is to help them find the right time to reach out to them. How painful is that problem? Well, if they don't make sales, they miss their targets, and then they might even leave the company if they miss their targets, either getting fired or just by backing out. Will they pay to solve it? Yes, we have evidence that they will pay to solve it. How much will they pay? We're not totally sure. We are a seed stage startup at this stage. So one of the ways that we've tried to approach, or one of the strategy hypotheses that we are working on at Honeysales, is keeping our product simple. So we try to delight our customers by keeping it simple. I'm not sure why there's a castle in the slide, but there is. Here's an example of our interface. We tried to keep it extremely simple, where as a salesperson, you see all of your prospects down the left-hand side here. These are all prospects who have what we call a signal. A signal might be a news event, might be a LinkedIn post, it might be a job change. In this case, we're highlighting a news event that this made-up company called Berlinio raised a Series B funding round, and they'll hire 100 new employees in the next 6 months. As a seller of HR software, that's very attractive to me and something that I should reach out to them about. And we generate a message that this seller can send to Jenny, hey, congrats on your Series B. Can we talk next week? It's a very straightforward thing, and we know that salespeople are driven by habits. We want them to wake up every morning, log into our app, do their job, and then get out and close the deals that they're starting, right? So keeping it very simple. The hard to copy part is finding the right signals. We generate thousands of signals. People have thousands of data points about them around the internet every day, and finding the right ones to connect our customers to is super important. In this case, if Berlinio had layoffs, or if there was an article about their daycare system that they just introduced, probably wouldn't be that interesting to our seller. So we need to find a way to connect the right signal with the right seller, and we do this through scoring. The margin enhancing part about it, or the hypothesis here, is that if our customers appreciate this behavior, they will grow the number of seats that they're buying from us as a sales organization grows. That will in turn feed into improved models of evaluating these signals, and that should lead to a better product that people are willing to pay more, buy more licenses to, essentially. So you might be asking, where's the AI? I did just mention models, so maybe there's some ML in there or something like that. But otherwise, there's not necessarily generative AI. We could probably build this product without generative AI. I don't know if anyone remembers what a clipping service is, but in the old days, if you were a company and you wanted to know when you appeared in the news, you jobbed it out to a company that read every single newspaper, clipped out the articles, and mailed them to you every week. So we could probably done something like that. Probably wouldn't be very efficient. We probably wouldn't be able to sell it at the price that we hope to with this product. So a couple of ways that we're using generative AI specifically. One is in signal scoring. I mentioned this earlier. To give you an example, we have at Personio. Personio is a big HR company. We have their prospect, who is the VP of people at Berlinio. And we have this news article that Berlinio raised a Series B. And so we're trying to find the overlap between those things and recognize that this signal is relevant to the buyer, is relevant to the seller, and an opportunity to reach out to the prospect. 10 years ago, we could have done this maybe by building a machine learning model, training it on thousands of examples, and then running it ourselves and incurring all of the cost and complexity that requires. Using a large language model, we can do a lot of this without having to build a lot of stuff ourselves. And so there's a lot of efficiency gained from that process. The other thing that we use, maybe not surprisingly, is to draft emails. A lot of people use large language models to do this today. It's a lot of what they're meant to do. The part in this case, it says, hey, Jenny, congrats on your Series B. Looks like you're going to do a lot of hiring, and I'd love to tell you more about our ATS, applicant tracking system. NPAL just deployed it to help onboard 100 new employees in 6 months, so there's a proof point there. And can we chat next week, right? Pretty straightforward message, but getting this right and incorporating all the right factors and making sure that it hits with the seller so that they understand why we're recommending this signal to them in the first place is pretty complicated. So we spend a lot of time on these things around scoring and messaging. I want to talk about a couple of the learnings that we've had, though, because it's not all gone terribly smoothly. Like sometimes we mess up and we take things away from it. The first is technical considerations, sort of the classic data quality issue of garbage in, garbage out. If you don't give consistent and reliable data to a large language model, it's not going to give you anything useful. Secondly is speed. If you're making requests to a hosted LLM like ChatGPT, that actually takes a lot of time. In fact, it takes orders of magnitude longer than it would to do it to a local model, for example. And lastly is consistency. LLMs are all about prediction, right? They're not necessarily about logic. And so sometimes when we push them into the logic realm, 2 plus 2, sometimes 2, most of the time 2 plus 2 is 4, but sometimes it's 5, and sometimes it's just banana, which is not helpful to us in any way. One of the consistency issues we saw recently was this little quirk of the German language, which was new to me until this. For those of you who don't speak German, German has, like Spanish and French, for example, formal and informal pronouns. So when a friend writes me a message, they say, "Hi, Andrew." They use my first name. "How are du?" Easy enough. When someone writes me a letter in German, and this is the only thing I like about receiving letters in German, they say, "Most honorable Mr. Martinez-Fonts, how are Sie?" Okay? Straightforward enough, right? So in German business, which is the language we operate in right now as a product, most sales outreach is done in a formal tone. But because it's 2024, some people start operating in an informal tone, and we offer our customers the ability to choose which one we'd like to generate the messages in, formal or informal. And we started getting messages back that were mixing up the address and the pronoun, and we're like, wait, what's going on? This doesn't make sense. Large language models should be able to figure this out. This is not that complicated. Well, it turns out as we dug deeper that there is actually a pattern. If anyone knows this, the Münchner Du and the Hamburger Sie, these are from the cities where presumably these patterns are used, that they actually switch things up. So we had to go back in and rewrite our prompts and make sure that they're being consistent from time to time. So that's a consistency problem. There's also a financial consideration. A data scientist named Skanda Vivek did an analysis of whether you want to use ChatGPT as a hosted service or you want to host your own open source models and run them there. He came up with this graph where you can see that there's a crossing point. His conclusion was if you're making thousands of requests a day, you're probably better off just paying for tokens from ChatGPT. If you're going to millions of requests a day, you probably should build your own infrastructure, stuff like that. This analysis was done over a year ago, so the crossing point will probably change as the vendors change their pricing, but the same principle should apply in the long run. I'm optimistic that prices will continue to drop for the hosted solutions, but I think it's also worth considering that the startups that are charging these fairly low prices and dropping prices also have they have raised eye-watering levels of funding. And at some point, their investors are going to want returns. I think that's going to put pressure on them to reduce prices all that much. The last thing I'll talk about is quality considerations. I don't know if anybody remembers, but a few years ago, the United States elected a celebrity as the president, and I'm American. You might remember Ronald Reagan. He was a film actor, he was elected president. Picture of him here in front of the Berlin Wall in 1987. And when he was negotiating arms control with the Soviets, he came to be known for a phrase which is trust but verify. This is a phrase that originally comes from Russian, and it essentially means we can have a treaty which says what we're going to do, but unless we actually enforce it by having people check to see if the missiles are there or not, it doesn't mean anything. So in the same way that we needed to enforce that the missiles were being removed, we need to check sometimes on what LLMs are giving us in terms of data. Sometimes that's just a PM and an engineer sitting down and reviewing a few dozen or 100 responses. But sometimes that's hiring a team that's actually reviewing the messages and the signals and making sure that everything's relevant. And we do some of that because we want to make sure that our reputation is intact and our product is useful. I brought 2 or 3 other examples, depending on how you count it, because I wanted to get out of the Honeysales world a little bit. And there's some really cool stuff that people are doing that I think is not just about applying AI, but doing it in a way that's delighting their customers in hard to copy, margin-enhancing ways. The first is Adobe Firefly. If you're not familiar with Firefly, it's essentially an image generator. So in the top left, top right there, someone asked for a simplified desert landscape. This one is a minimalist chair in a bright room. It helps designers create the image that they want. And Adobe has had a stock photo library for many years now. But when you're looking for a stock photo that's got a couple walking down the left side of the street, but you really need them to be on the right side of the street, like you're just kind of screwed. You don't get the image that you absolutely want. And so Adobe Firefly, you can say, great, take this image and move the couple to the other side of the street, and you should get the image that you're looking for. The delight here is I got just the image I wanted. The hard to copy part is that only Adobe has the training data from all of their stock photo library. It's all extremely well tagged so that people could find it in the past. That goes into extremely useful training data for their models. And the margin enhancement comes from not only charging for Firefly as a product itself, but by integrating it into their whole suite and increasing the value of the suite overall. Another example is eBay. They released something called Shop the Look pretty recently. And if you buy fashion on eBay, you might have seen this. What they do is they take your purchase history and they generate looks that they think you might appreciate. In this case, Scandinavian minimalism, a sweater, a skirt, and a pair of boots. And then when you tap on the skirt, they show you the skirts that are in their product catalog that you can buy right away. The delight here is obviously, these are great recommendations based on my personal style. For me, it would just be jeans and dress shirts. The hard to copy part is only eBay has my purchase history, so they know what I'm interested in. And the margin enhancement is just about driving for frequency and keeping those customers engaged. You can imagine getting a notification every week of these are the new looks that we recommend for you. So the last one I'll talk about is Apple Intelligence, just because it's so recent and I had such a strong reaction to it. For those of you that missed it, Apple Intelligence was about Apple starting to bake generative AI into their operating systems. And their tagline, I have to say, really made me groan when I first saw it. AI for the rest of us. And at first I was like, what is this folksy BS that Apple is coming with right now about AI? This is one of the most valuable companies in the world, one of the most technologically advanced companies in the world, and it's almost like talking down to us. I realized afterwards, in retrospect though, that for those of us, for everyone who's not engaged in AI like a lot of us are, AI can be a terrifying idea. If the only headline you saw was that a bunch of AI researchers signed a letter saying that AI would destroy humanity, is that something you'd want on your cell phone? Probably not. People are pretty touchy about what they put on their phones. So I think Apple was, at some level, playing it safe and relying on the brand that they've built over the past probably 10 years, really, around privacy and security, and basically saying, listen, we've got you. This is going to be generative AI that's fun and useful, and it's not scary. You can make new emojis, and everybody loves emojis. Emojis never hurt anybody. There was a Wired article that came out that I think just hit the nail on the head, which is Apple proved that AI is a feature and not a product. Apple knows that the way to its customers' hearts is by creating beautiful, elegant, and impactful products that move them. So the product is the laptop or the video editing software. It's not necessarily the AI. AI might make the product better, but it's not the product into itself. And that's where I'm going to wrap up here. So if there are 3 things I would like you to take away from this, is first, spend time developing your strategy. This should be the starting point for any decisions that you're making. And if you don't have one, try to develop one as quickly as possible. Use any of the frameworks or read a book and just do it. Second, focus on solving customer problems. You're not an AI manager, you're a product manager. So solve customer problems with the product. Whether that involves AI or not, great. And lastly, AI is a tool, not a product unto itself, as we just talked about with Apple. Another way to say all of this is do your job. I said at the beginning, like, the part that I love about this job is solving people's problems. It is a hard job. That's why they pay us money to do it, right? So it's hard, but it should be extremely motivating and extremely fulfilling to you if you're doing it right. And you can do it. You have the tools available to you. So that's all for me. Thank you very much for your time.